just prior to resuming the examination of Mr. Spinks, if I might take the opportunity to say something about Mr. Jeffrey Jackson, who's a member of the governing body and who's currently in Australia.
That's the governing body in New York.
That's right. So some weeks ago it came to the attention of the Royal Commission that Mr. Jackson, a member of the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses in New York, was in Australia. We wrote to the lawyers acting for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia and asked if their client would procure a statement from Mr. Jackson and make him available as a witness. The reply that was received was that Mr. Jackson was in Australia for private, compassionate reasons, and also that since the governing body was not involved in the implementation and administration of policies and procedures in relation to child sexual abuse, he would not be able to give relevant evidence. The Royal Commission then left the matter at that point, but subsequently came to the view that Mr. Jackson's evidence would likely be useful for this hearing, particularly in relation to the formulation of policies and procedures by the governing body and the possibility for change of policies and procedures in the future. We therefore wrote last week asking whether the lawyers for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia would accept service of a summons on Mr. Jackson. The reply that was received reiterated that for reasons of compassion related to why Mr. Jackson was in the country, it would, as it was put, be unconscionable for him to be required to prepare to give evidence and to give evidence. Taking that into account, Mr. Jackson has not been summoned to give evidence. We would, however, welcome evidence from him or another member of the governing body, particularly with regard to the setting of policies and procedures and the possibilities for change of those policies and procedures. And the door is open for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia or the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia to present such evidence for this hearing, including by video conference.
Gentlemen, I don't know which of you two should respond to that, but can I make it plain that if it's not plain already, that the Commissioner and I have concern about the process of investigation and determination of allegations within the Jehovah's Witness and whether it's a safe and effective process for the determination of an allegation by a person that they have been sexually abused by someone within the church. Now, I understand the theocratic foundation for the present position, at least I think I do, but at the moment we do not have a witness, as I understand it, who can tell us what the way forward might be to enable the church to bring its processes into to bring its processes to the point where, rather than run the risk of increasing the trauma on those who have been abused, the processes can assist in alleviating the trauma. It is of fundamental importance to people who have been abused that when they go to the relevant authorities, and in this case it is the church, because the church demands a complaint be brought to the church, but it's of fundamental importance to people who are abused that when they go to the relevant authority, their story is accepted and they have the opportunity to tell the whole of their story to a forum which they can have trust in and which will enable them then to pass, as it were, some of the burden to that institution which requires, in this case, that it report or that person report. Now, these are very significant issues. They're not small issues, they're significant issues. And at the moment we're, as I say, facing a situation where we can see a problem, but we do need assistance from the church in what is the solution. And we rather thought that Mr. Jackson might be able to assist us in that respect. I understand the reason for compassion being extended to him. I have no difficulty with that. And for that reason, I have not issued a summons requiring him to attend. But at the moment, we face a serious issue which only the Church can help us with. Now, whether that needs a response now, I don't know, but we would like you to reflect upon that situation. Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Your Honour, may I respond on behalf of the persons I represent? What Your Honour's points are being taken on board, are being addressed, and are being given the most earnest consideration by the authorities. Mr. Jackson would probably not have been of any assistance in any event, because his role and his responsibility is in relation to the translation of matters. It's not in relation to these sorts of matters. However, Mr. O'Brien, who will give evidence before Your Honour, is able to assist Your Honour in regard to some of the matters Your Honour has raised. And I can assure Your Honour that to the extent to which Mr. O'Brien is unable to assist Your Honour, we will do everything that we can to ensure that the Commission is given the assistance that is required from us and to help the Commission.
The assumption I make at the moment is that if there is to be change, it's change that has to be ultimately sanctioned, if not directed by New York. Am I right?
Your Honour, ultimately it's a matter for submission. We understand Your Honour's points, and we understand Your Honour's particular concern about the environment in which these matters are reported. So that's not been lost upon us at all. The question, I think, at the end of the day is the adaptability of the present structure to these individual circumstances of any particular person, and whether that present structure is inappropriate, so it must be done away with, or whether the appropriate structure can be modelled for the purposes of an individual person's case. And that's really, I think, probably one of the more difficult questions that the Commission will have to deal with at the end of the day.
It is, but if there is to be change, again, I'd assumed that change has to be either directed or sanctioned in New York.
Well, Your Honour, it may be the case. It depends upon what change is contemplated. My instructions are, my understanding is that the local branch has significant flexibility in adapting the judicial committee procedure to the individual case. As Your Honour, I think, has heard and will hear, the Elders' Handbook is for elders worldwide, but the autonomy of the branches enables the branches to tailor these matters for individual cases, and that's part of what Mr. Spinks's evidence is about today. So that it may be that...
Well, I'm still at a loss, because as I understand it, the ultimate framework comes from New York.
No, Your Honour, the ultimate framework comes from the Scriptures, in the sense...
All right, yeah. But that as interpreted by New York.
Perhaps as interpreted, but also, we would say, as set down in the Scriptures, so that the structure may not be changeable. But
well, you see, that's a serious issue. If the way the Scriptures are being interpreted and applied is creating additional trauma for people who are sexually abused by members of the Church, that's a serious problem.
Understood, Your Honour. I think that, again, ultimately it's a matter for submissions. I think our submission at the end of the day will be that the structure itself doesn't create or exacerbate the trauma that has been suffered. What is required is for the structure to be adapted to the individual person, so as to ensure...
Well, that may be your submission, but I should put you on notice that that's not a submission which at the moment I think is going to deal with the problem we have.
Understood, Your Honour. And that's why perhaps at the end of all of the witnesses that are to come, if I can put it this way, Your Honour's concerns will be hopefully addressed, but certainly to the extent to which they're not, I can assure Your Honour that the Jehovah's Witnesses will cooperate in addressing such matters.
Let me, I suppose, illustrate it in a direct way.
Yes, Your Honour.
We've now conducted more than 3,800 private sessions as part of the Royal Commission's work.
Yes, Your Honour.
Which are people who have been abused coming and telling us their story with the expectation that their story will be accepted. We have a variety of requests from people as to the commissioner person who actually receives their story. And there are some who will say, I only want to talk to a woman.
Yes, Your Honour.
There are others who will say, I only want to talk to a man.
Yes, Your Honour.
One needs to be able to say, if you're in the process of receiving these sorts of allegations, one needs to be able to say that we can meet a request like that in order not to impose trauma on the person when they come to tell their story.
Understood, Your Honour. I mean, Your Honour, the very point Your Honour makes is to a certain extent covered in the Elders' Handbook, to a certain extent. I don't say completely, but to a certain extent in paragraph 24 of the Elders' Handbook, where a sister within the faith may go to another sister within the faith to disclose matters.
Yes, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the process, and I think you know I'm talking about the whole process. And there's a second step in this, and that is the need to have the survivor confront the abuser.
Yes, Your Honour.
Now, all of our learning in the civil courts tells us that that process is likely to create, for some people, extraordinary trauma.
Yes, Your Honour.
And we need to look at that process as well.
Yes, Your Honour. Your Honour, accepting, I do not for 1 second cavil with Your Honour, accepting that what Your Honour has said, it's our understanding that the more sensitive the response at every step along the way, the less the chance of inflicting or imposing further trauma or exacerbating the situation for the survivor. So that our response is that at every step along the way, it needs to be sensitive to the individual needs of that person, bearing in mind both our understanding of secular rights, that is, the right for the individual to report the matter, and at the same time to respect the individual's desire for scriptural counselling or for the matter to be dealt with within the faith. So those considerations need to be balanced in dealing with the matter.
That doesn't answer the problem we have, because the starting point for the discussion is an adherent is required to report. So it's not a question of seeking to have their allegation determined by the church. The obligation, as we understand it, falls upon them to bring that allegation to the church, and then the church imposes its structure. This is a discussion that we'll need to have further down the track, but I just want to make it plain that these are really significant issues. We had thought that perhaps Mr. Jackson might be able to help us with them, but if he can't,
Your Honour, no.
Then so be it. Now, we had, I've forgotten her name, but the doctor last Friday.
Dr. Applewhite, Your Honour.
Yes. And you realise where her evidence ended up.
Yes, I do, Your Honour, yes.
In terms of the church's processes.
Yes, Your Honour.
Although she came to say that they were good, the ultimate position, as we understand what she said, is they're flawed. And those flaws are the things that I'm talking to you about now.
Yes, I understand, Your Honour. We do understand, Your Honour, and obviously these matters have to be addressed and have to be addressed to assist the Commission. I don't wish to take up more of Your Honour's time now, and I'm conscious of the
Anyway, if Mr. Jackson can't help, and then there we are.
But Mr. O'Brien will be of assistance, Your Honour, and Mr. Spinks will be of assistance, Your Honour. Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes.
As Your Honour pleases. Mr. Spinks, I want to address the mechanics a little more of the responding to reports and allegations process and just understand it. Is it right that the procedure and principles are to be found in the following 4 documents? Organised to do Jehovah's Will, 2005. Shepherd the Flock of God, 2010. The 1 October 2012 letter, and then the 2013 guidelines for branch office service desks.
Those are certainly the documents, but just the component that's missing from that is that, as the October 1, 2012 letter says, is that the elders contact the branch office, and I think if that's poorly described, which it would seem that it is by my statement, I apologise for that. But if I could again just
before you carry on, for now I'm just trying to seek to identify the documents that we have reference to. Is that the corpus of documents, the ones that I've identified? We'll look in a moment what they say with regard to other discretionary factors or so on, but are those the documents where we to find the applicable principles and procedure?
in addition to the Bible principles and the fact that, would I be permitted just to read the one sentence that I was going to refer to, if I could, please?
Yes, of course. So that's at tab 124.
Yes. Page 131 of the Elders' Handbook.
I beg your pardon. I thought you were referring to the October 2012 letter. Is it the handbook you're referring to?
Yes.
Tab 120, yes. Which page?
Page 131.
Yes, ringtail 132, yes.
Paragraph 18, which, as we read, starts with immediately call the branch office. But the last sentence of paragraph 18 says, the branch office will then give direction based on the circumstances involved in each situation. So, yes, those are 4 current documents based on the scriptures, but that is a pivotal sentence there where the branch office will give direction based on the circumstances involved in each situation.
Yes, well, I'll come to that in a moment. As I explained, I'm trying to identify the documents, and then we can then go on to see how the documents are applied and what discretion there may be for the branch office and so on. But those are the documents, are they? The ones that I identified. Organised, Shepherd, October 2012 letter, 2013 guidelines. Those are the 4 documents. Are there any other documents you identify, and the scriptures you've identified, any other documents you identify that one should have reference to find the procedures and principles that are to be applied in responding to reports and allegations of child sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witness Church?
I apologise for just not saying directly yes to your question. Are those the only 4 documents? Because we, or I, have identified that those are the current documents that have relation to child abuse. But, and I think we've made the point that we have published extensively with regard to child abuse. Some of those articles are referenced in the handbook and the letter. Those articles are extensively used by, right from the 80s, 90s to current. Those articles are used and specific quotes from those are used in addition to the various seminars and additional letters. So do those 4 letters represent the complete direction that is given to elders? The answer is no, but those are relevant documents and listed as the current ones that primarily deal with some of the key issues.
Well, those articles and so on you refer to, that's dealing with how parents should deal with child sexual abuse with their children and so on. They're not sources for procedure and principles as to how the organisation responds to allegations of child sexual abuse, are they? Yes,
they are. For example, it's in the submission documents, I believe, and please forgive me if I misquote, but for example, the November 1st, 1995 Watchtower introduced, and it may have been before that, but that's the one in my role over the last couple of decades, it's stuck in my mind, introduced the using a letter for the victim or survivor to be able to document the allegation. So would it be better if all those quotes were listed one after the other in this book, that hundreds of thousands of these books to elders in every culture? I think it probably would be. So that's just one example of a reference. There are others.
Well, I understand that may have introduced something that's new, but is it not the case that that then is picked up in one of the 4 documents to which I referred?
If it is, that's just, my memory fails me if that's the case, but if the November 1st 1995 Watchtower is in those letters, it's just gone from my memory, sorry, but I'm certain it's in the submission documents.
Doesn't this present a bit of a difficulty to an elder in a congregation somewhere who's faced with an allegation of child sexual abuse, if it's so difficult to determine where this material is on that's still current, on which he can rely?
Well, it would be if he didn't ring the branch office, but that's why his first instruction on every occasion is to contact the branch office, and these are the references, remembering with respect that most of these elders we've spoken to, family men, have dealt with one of these issues in their entire decades as an elder. Some of them may never be confronted with it in their lifetime. So that instruction for elders to ring the branch office, where we assist with the myriad of references, I think Dr. Applewhite acknowledged that we have flooded the website and our publications with references. So what you say is true, that's why they ring the branch office.
What about, excuse me, a victim of child sexual abuse? Do you accept that?
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.